All right, it's hot and sticky here in Texas. We are at QuakeCon, and I am honored to be joined by Tim Willits, creative director on Rage at id Software. How are you doing, sir? Are you feeling peppy this morning?
Oh, good. Yes, a good QuakeCon so far.
You guys shipped Doom 3 in 2004, is that right? So that's been 5 years.
Yes.
What was the process like coming out of Doom 3? I mean, obviously I'm sure you didn't roll straight into this post-apocalyptic wasteland. Did you guys prototype other ideas? Like, what was the kind of focusing process when you got down to this idea?
Well, once we finished Doom 3, we actually worked a bit on the Xbox version of Doom 3. Then we helped Raven work on Quake 4. And then we started developing actually another game that some people have heard about. It was codenamed Darkness. We worked on that for a while, and then that wasn't really shaping up the way that we wanted it to. So we scrapped that, and then we started on Rage. But during that whole time, John Carmack and the technology crew, they were working on the fundamental code of the Tech 5 stuff. So it wasn't like we were just kind of sitting around doing nothing. It was some very smart people working on some very cool technology. And we saw the potential of what that could do, which then spawned the idea of making this cool wasteland that's all uniquely textured, having these really crazy environments. And the reason that we picked a post-apocalyptic world is it allowed us to ground the fiction in some type of reality, but it also allowed us to do some kind of over-the-top science fiction type stuff like mutants and special weapons and things.
Right now we've been concentrating on the fundamentals of the first-person shooter combat, and then we might break off and we have a full group kind of iterating through the vehicle combat. Vehicles need a wide open space, and at first we weren't sure how we would handle it and exactly where we wanted to go. And then we struck this nice balance. id's always been good at pushing the visuals and kind of making these handcrafted, believable environments. Believable in the sense of they look really nice, but not necessarily realistic. So what we did with the kind of large open world is we took that same kind of handcrafted direction that we use in our shooter environments, and we put it in the world. So instead of just having these procedural hills and throw some grass on it and then have a vehicle travel across, we take a lot of time and care into how we actually structure the landscape. We lead the player, we entice him, we put little points of interest to kind of guide the player around the world.
You've got the open world, but there are still corridor sequences in there. You showed a couple in the demo, and I'm assuming there's quite a few more. Can you give us an idea kind of what the split is between like open world action versus these kind of instanced or sort of split off, like self-contained sort of corridor crawls?
Okay, so I'll try not to evade the question, but we get that a lot, and it's at this stage in development it would be impossible to put a ratio of how it's going to work out. But the thing that's worth mentioning is it actually is up to the player. There's some subtle differences between players, and we've noticed already in some of our first focus testing. Some people kind of gravitate toward the vehicle and they spend a little more time in there. We reward that. We allow the player to kind of explore the different gameplay areas of the world. The thing we knew we wanted to do is have those kind of shooter experiences, that we've always made these kind of intense action shooter games. Now we have a new fiction, so we can do a lot of clever and new things that we haven't done before. But the biggest thing about that ratio is we're not at the end yet, and I think it'll settle somewhere differently for the different players, because some people will just gravitate naturally toward the vehicles, and then some people will just love the shooter elements.
Couldn't be any easier. What do you say?
Are you guys trying to amp up the sort of the combat experience? Like what are the sort of enemy behaviors we can look for this time? Are you sort of ratcheting up their tactics, their evasions and that kind of thing? Yeah,
so for me as a designer, that's one of the coolest things about the new fiction. Just blank slate. We're not dealing with it's not necessarily things from hell anymore. It's not aliens. It's not just soldiers. It's not zombies. We've come up with we have 3 major factions in the game. One of them we're not talking a whole lot about yet, and the other 2 would be our bandit factions and then the mutants. And even between let's take the bandits for instance, even in that faction of enemies, there's a whole lot of diversity. We have low-level bandits that'll run around and try to melee, and they're like these ragtag guys, and they don't care a lot for their buddies. And then you might fight a group that's a lot more militaristic, and everything from the way the voice acting is to how they dive into cover Our goal, and this is kind of what we write on the board, is to give the player something new around every corner. So that's how we treat that. So we're constantly mixing it up when we're doing the overall pacing of the game.
Got a problem, and I believe you might be the man for the job.
You guys have got some crazy large-scale texturing going on in id Tech 5 with Rage. Can you, like, real briefly and for a layman, kind of explain what that is and how that enhances the sort of visual presentation of the game?
That's the biggest, like, keyword, the buzzword is megatexture, right? But the more important thing about the technology and id Tech 5 in general is that it just allows us to draw a whole bunch of polygons really fast with unique surface texturing everywhere. A good way to think about it is, if you imagine this canvas, all of the textures in the world are kind of placed in this kind of quilted pattern. And as you move around the world, when the game knows you need a texture, it just pulls it. And it pulls the next one and pulls the next one. And that's kind of the virtualization. It's a pretty easy concept to grasp, but it's all the magic that John's put behind the scenes that makes it so robust and work across all the platforms.
Cool. So does that mean, if you stand up on a hill, look out over the wasteland, you're not going to see like the same little like dirt tile repeating off into the distance? Exactly.
Every single surface pixel is unique. It's truly unique. We start building the world like a lot of other people build the world. We might use tiling textures, but we have all of these tools and methods to add a substantial amount of detail after we have the worlds built.
We've seen a number of post-apocalyptic wastelands in the past and other entertainment media. How did you go about setting the tone and designing the art for this one to kind of set it apart from everything else we've seen?
Well, I think what's going to make this one very different from any other post-apocalyptic games is the color palette. We're setting it up in something that's going to be very colorful. Wide, expansive blue skies, very, very color oriented in terms of pastels, very bright colors all over the place, and then we're going to gradually shift this color palette into something a little darker towards the second part of the game. So I think all that together is going to set it very different from any other games.
The big technology hook for the new game is the megatexture stuff in id Tech 5. As an artist, are you just going crazy with that stuff? I mean, do you feel liberated? I guess a good way to ask it is there anything you can't do now that you have this technology? I
think the only thing you have to be aware is controlling yourself. Actually, really, that's where we're at right now with our technology. I mean, the potential of what we can do and what we're already currently doing with it is amazing. It's like we were saying, earlier. It's like you could go to a pixel level and go pixel by pixel if we wanted to. So it's really more about controlling yourself, with the scope of a project that needs to be completed. But it's definitely a dream for an art director to be working with such a technology. Well, one of the interesting things that relates also to the gameplay and the story is once you understand, what's at stake, at one particular moment or another, you can completely control how visually you approach it, whether it's by the composition itself of your environment or whether that's, by the choice of the color palette that you're going to use to make that happen. And having that kind of technology at our disposal makes it even more efficient because now we have control over much more information than we used to in the past. So we can really be very subtle about how we want to carry a certain message or convey a certain emotion in a project.
So you've talked so far about how you've got the kind of overarching story, but it's got two distinct halves.
Yes.
Is it accurate that everything you guys have shown so far is from that first half?
Yes.
So anything you can tell us about the second half? I mean, is it going to be like a radically different setting? Are you going to be encountering new characters, any new abilities? How does that division work in terms of like story and gameplay?
Well, it is a little early to talk about the second half. We want to hold some stuff back, but I can say that yes, the environments will be different. There'll be some new characters that you interact with. There's some new bad guys that you fight. Some new weapons. It will be more of the same but greater and different. One of the cool things about the id Tech 5 is it allows us to develop every unique area, every environment to be different. So you can expect the second half to be, look a lot different than the first half.
Cool. My last question really is, when are you going to start updating your plan file again?
Oh boy, I think plans have been replaced by Tweeters and Facebooks. But speaking of that, Rage does have a Facebook page, and Rage does have a Twitter page.
All right, always on message. That's impressive. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.